Hello everyone. Today I thought that I would do a full face of Makeup by Mario and to talk about all of the products from them that I have tried. And the reason that I was thinking about doing this is because I did notice that there is currently a 25% off sale on the Makeup by Mario site. And I realized that I do have a lot of products from this company, and some of these are products that I haven't even really talked about at all on camera or demonstrated. So I thought that it would be good to do a video talking about all of these products. And so in terms of the products that I have to talk about, first of all, I have the Makeup by Mario SurrealSkin foundation, and this is actually a foundation that I like quite a bit. And then I also have the Makeup by Mario concealer, and so I can talk about that a little bit. And then one product of theirs that I do really like is the Makeup by Mario SurrealSkin soft setting spray. And in general, in the past, I have not done very well with setting sprays, but I do think that this one is a very nice one. And then I also have the Makeup by Mario loose setting powder, and this was released, I think, in the fall. And then in terms of bronzers and contours, I have this product, which is called the Soft Sculpt Transforming Skin Enhancer, which I have actually really liked. And then I also picked up this product, which was released last year, which is called the Soft Sculpt Bronzing and Shaping Serum. And then I also have two of their blushes. These are the blushes that come in a compact, and they are called the Soft Pop Plumping Blush Veil. And so I have one that is called Barely Blushing, which is a very light shade, which is what I'm wearing right now. And then I have one that is called Strawberry Sunset, which I have been using more as like a pop of a color. And this was released late last year also. And so I've been using this on occasion as well, and I'll put a little bit of this on later on in this video. And then in terms of eye products, I have this pencil, which is called the Master Blade Brow Pencil, that I just picked up really recently, and so I can talk about my experiences with that. And I have one eyeshadow palette from Makeup by Mario, and that is called the Ethereal Eyes Moonlight Palette, and so I can demonstrate this for you. And then in terms of lip products, I have one of their lip pencils, which I think is actually one of my favorite lip pencils at this point. So I'm thinking that maybe I should actually pick up some more of these. And then I also have one of their lipsticks that was released, I think early last year, maybe about a year or so ago. And this is called the Super Satin lipstick. And then in addition, probably my favorite product from Makeup by Mario of all times was called the Ethereal Eyes eyeshadow palette. And so it looked like this. And unfortunately, this is not on the market anymore. And so that is a very sad thing for a lot of people who did really like this palette. But I have been looking for options that give kind of the same look as this palette. So I will be talking a little bit about some of those options in this video. And then I also will be talking about some of the other palettes in my collection that some people have argued are a good alternative to the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes Moonlight palette. And so first, a little bit of information about me. I am 60 years old, and I do have dry and very sensitive skin. And over the past 4 years, I've tried well over 1,000 makeup products, most of them high-end. And so I do have a pretty good basis of comparison for everything that I try out on this channel. And so when I purchase new makeup products, I am hoping that they are going to help me to look a little bit fresher and a little bit younger, and also that I will be able to use them with a minimal amount of fuss and without putting very much time into doing my makeup. And then in addition, I do have a zero tolerance policy with regard to being unwilling to use any products that irritate my skin at all. And one thing that I have found is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my skin. And I know that those ingredients tend to be quite irritating for many other people as well. And so I just don't talk about products that contain those ingredients on this channel. And in terms of Makeup by Mario, this is a line of products that was started in 2020, and this is sold mostly through Sephora. And it was started by the makeup artist who has been the primary makeup artist for Kim Kardashian. And so that made me a bit skeptical at the beginning because I'm not really crazy about that makeup style that uses very heavy makeup and a lot of contouring to it. I tend to really like a much more natural look. And in addition, in the early days when I looked at the ingredient list for some of these products, I wasn't that optimistic that these would be good products for me just because of some of the ingredients that they were using. But I do think that over the past couple years, they have introduced a bunch of new products that do seem to have considerably better ingredient lists. And that seems to be the case with the Kim Kardashian line, Skin by Kim, and also with the Kylie Jenner line of cosmetics, that all of these seem to be using much better ingredients than they did in the past. And so apparently all of these people have decided that clean beauty is kind of a thing, maybe for themselves and certainly in terms of the products that they're putting out there. And so a lot of the products that I have tried by Makeup by Mario over the past couple years that are newer releases, they have worked pretty well for me. Now there are quite a few other products that are a bit more on the older side that I haven't tried or that I've tried just in the store and decided that they weren't for me. And so I won't be talking about those products in this video, but I really have tried out just about all of the products that they have released over the past couple years, and I have tried out all of the most popular products from them. So I think I can talk about all of those pretty much with some confidence that I do have an understanding of how they have worked for me. So one product from Makeup by Mario that was released about 2 years ago is the Makeup by Mario SurrealSkin Foundation. And this was one of the very first videos that I did for my channel, which I also started about 2 years ago. And so I went back and took a look at that video. And certainly the quality of the video in terms of the audio and in terms of my speaking skills and things like that were a little bit on the more beginner side. But I am thinking that a lot of the things that I pointed out in that video, I still feel like this product stands with regard to those. And in particular, I think that this is one of those foundations that has the ability to put a little bit of a layer on the skin that makes your skin look a little bit plumper and a little bit fresher. And I think that this is likely because it's giving the look of people having more fat volume. And so as women get older, one of the things that happens is that they tend to lose fat volume in the face, and therefore if you put on a foundation that does have a little bit more of a texture to it, that as long as it is not emphasizing the wrinkles that you may have on your face, it does have the potential to look quite a bit younger in terms of what your skin and your face in general is looking like. And so I did have a few different examples of people who had done videos in terms of before and after with regard to this foundation. And I do think that women who are in their maybe mid-40s and above, that this foundation does seem to work well for them. Now I think that the Jones Road foundation may be even better at that, and that is one reason why it has become so popular. But unfortunately for me, that product tends to be a bit irritating because it does have some essential oils in it, including rose geranium oil and also ginger root oil. And so I can sort of use that over a primer if I only use it on occasion. And so sometimes I do use it that way because I do think that it looks particularly nice, especially in pictures. But for the most part, I am looking for options for that, and I do think that this Makeup by Mario is one of those. I do also think that the new Patrick Ta foundation, that one has worked well for that, and that is a product that doesn't have silicone in it, so that is another thing that I like about that Patrick Ta foundation. And I actually really kind of liked the recent release of the Isamaya product, which is a concealer. And technically they say it's a concealer, but I think it's more of like a skin enhancer that does offer just a bit of that plumpness on my cheeks. And so I did go back and try out this Makeup by Mario foundation again over the last week or so, and I have really liked it still. I do think that it looks particularly nice on my skin, and even though it is a higher level of coverage than I usually tend to use, I do really like it. And then sometimes I do mix it with a moisturizer, and in particular I use this moisturizer from the Outset, which is called the Nourishing Squalene Daily Moisturizer. And so that does make it a bit thinner and a little bit more like a tinted moisturizer too, that I can put on my skin without having as much coverage. And I think when I do that, it doesn't give me as much of that plumping benefit, but it does look a lot more natural. And so that is something that I do think is a plausible thing to do with this foundation as well. Now, one improvement that Makeup by Mario has done recently is that they have added some shades. And so originally there were 30 shades, and I did spend quite a bit of time trying out a variety of different shades in the Sephora store, and I became really convinced that there was no good shade for me, which is a little bit unusual. I think that very frequently my skin tone is really considered to be a really popular one and considered to be kind of a cornerstone type of a skin tone for most makeup foundation lines. But in this case, there really was no foundation that I found to be appropriate for me at all. And that in order to use this product, I really needed to use two different ones and then to mix them together. And so I originally had this one, which is 2N, and I also have this one, which is 4C. And when I mixed them together, I did feel like they looked nice, but having two bottles of foundation out on my counter all the time is just a little bit too much for me. And so what I have more done is just put this away and not used it too much, largely for that reason, I think. And so recently they did release 9 new shades, and so I picked up this one, which is called 3.5C, and I do think that this one is pretty much in between those two shades that I originally used. And so I have been able to use this on my skin without having to mix it with some other foundation or without needing to do a lot of work to adjust for it by using bronzers or something like that over the top of it. Now, whether this is exactly the perfect shade for me compared to other foundations in my collection, I'm not exactly sure about that. I feel like this one is just a little bit on the gray side, and that I would a little bit prefer to have something that was not quite so gray, but I don't think it's been a bad thing for me. Now, one thing that I will say is that Sephora does not have all 39 shades. They only have, I think, 32 shades depicted at present. And so what they seem to have done is to take out some of the old shades, and they're not selling those anymore. And then they have a little graphic on the website that says that if this used to be your shade, then you should pick one of these two new shades. And so on Sephora, and in going to the Sephora store, you're not necessarily going to be exposed to the full range of shades. So that's a little bit frustrating for me, because even if I pick out the shade that's best at Sephora, I'm always a little bit wondering if there is one that is not at Sephora that might be even better for me. And I certainly do not think that the pictures that are on either the Makeup by Mario website or on the Sephora website, I don't think that any of those photos are very good in terms of telling you what the shades are going to be like, in terms of either the descriptions or in terms of the pictures of the models or the pictures of the foundation. And so it is a little bit suboptimal in terms of being able to pick out the right foundation for you. And I think that the one that I have is probably the best one, but I'm not absolutely sure of that at this point because I haven't had a chance to try all of the different options. Now, whether or not they are going to keep having all 39 of these shades on the Makeup by Mario website, I'm not absolutely sure about that. It does say on their website that it says, find your match with our new and improved range of 39 flexible shades. And so that does make it seem like they're going to keep selling all of those shades on their website. But I also looked at an Instagram post that they did a while back, and it looked like they were only demonstrating something like 32 of those shades. And so I'm not sure if they were just showing that off because those are the ones that are available at Sephora, or if eventually they are planning to remove some of those shades from their website. But I did swatch the 3 shades that I have already. And one thing that I noticed when I look at these particular shades is that the 2N, that one does look pretty neutral to me. But the one that is 4C, that one actually looks really, really yellow to my eyes. And so the idea that that is cool, that's a little bit perplexing. I know that there are some companies like MAC and House Labs that when they say cool, they are defining that as yellow. But I'm not sure that that is exactly what Makeup by Mario is doing across the board. It seems to be a little bit more haphazard than that in terms of what the shades look like, at least in terms of what they look like on the website. And it could be that those are just bad pictures. So I'm not really sure. And I do think that this new shade, which is 3.5C, that one is more like a neutral shade. It doesn't look nearly as yellow as that old shade that I had. And it does look kind of on the gray side to my eyes. So I think that if you have a Sephora that is accessible to you, that's starting out by going to that store rather than just sort of blindly purchasing something online, may turn out to be a better idea. So I'm not sure that whoever put this foundation together, that their color development skills were ideal, but in terms of the actual formula of the foundation, I do think that this is really nice. This is a foundation that has some silicone in it, but it is not quite as silicone heavy as some of the foundations that are on the market. And I feel like the ingredient list looks really good to me in terms of not having ingredients in it that are irritating to me or to many other people likely. And I don't feel like this has been irritating for my skin at all. So I've been really happy about that. And of the foundations that I purchased previously, I purchased those 2 years ago, and I think that they have held up for me fine, and I would feel perfectly comfortable putting them on my skin at this point if my skin were the right color for those. And I also do feel like this is a foundation that, even though it is silicone based, that it has been fairly easy for me to get off. So in some cases, foundations that are more waterproof, like for instance the Fenty foundations or some of the foundations from MAC, those can be really, really difficult to get off of my face. And in this case, I feel like if I just use a regular cleansing balm, like something in the neighborhood of Take the Day Off by Clinique, or if I just use a cleanser like the Lisa Eldridge cleansing balm or just a regular oil cleanser, that has worked fine for me, which is not always the case with all foundations that are on the market. Now, I would say that this is probably not an appropriate foundation for oily skin. I think that it's probably going to be most appropriate for drier skin, or sort of normal skin might be all right also. And I think that especially for mature skin, this could be worth trying. And so in general, I think that the formula for this is really good, but it is a quite thick foundation and it is a little bit on the sticky side. And so in order to be more successful with it, first of all, I would suggest not using too much of it. So I have definitely found that if I just use one pump of this and use this all over my face, that is more than enough in order to give me a full coverage, and it does spread out very, very nicely. And then I would just use a brush over it in order to kind of brush it in and even it out. But in general, I don't think that you want to over apply this, just as I don't think you want to over apply, for instance, the Jones Road What the foundation. In both of those cases, using a minimal amount of the product is probably a good idea. And then in the video footage, I am demonstrating putting this on at full strength on half of my face, and then on the other half I have mixed it with some moisturizer, in particular that moisturizer from the Outset, and then putting that on. And I think that in both cases it looks okay. I actually think that just putting it on at full strength seems to work pretty well for this particular foundation, and I'm not getting a lot of emphasis of things like wrinkles when I use it, and so I don't think that you should feel that you really need to mix it with a moisturizer, whereas there are some foundations that I've tried, and I'm thinking in particular the foundation that is from Euphoria, which is another foundation that I do really, really like, but that I really feel like I need to use it mixed with a moisturizer. And I don't think you really need to do that with this one, or at least I have not needed to. And I also think that this is a foundation that I really do feel the need to set, and that it works much better for me when I set it with either an appropriate powder or with a setting spray. And so before, just a few months ago, I didn't feel like I could use setting sprays at all. I felt like they were all irritating to my face, or that they really did nothing. But recently, Makeup by Mario came out with this new setting spray, and also NARS came out with a setting spray that I also like. And so I think that either of those setting sprays has worked really well with this particular foundation. And so this is the Makeup by Mario setting spray that I have been using, and it is called the SurrealSkin Soft Setting Spray. And it doesn't have any fragrance in it, and I think that the ingredient list looks really good to me. And when I put it on my skin, I will just spray on a little bit and then kind of just brush it on my skin with my fingers. And I think that after I do that, the foundation is much more wearable. It might last a little bit longer. I'm not even sure about that. But it certainly feels a lot better, and if I had long hair, my hair would be less likely to stick to it. I don't think that hair thing is as much of an issue with this particular foundation as it is with, for instance, the Jones Road WTF foundation. But I do think that this this one helps the texture of this product a lot. And when I use this rather than powder, it doesn't look as dry, and it still gives the sense that it looks a little bit moist, but it doesn't feel sticky, and it's not likely to get disturbed as easily. And most importantly, if I put that setting spray down, then I think that it does make it a lot more wearable, but it doesn't take away from that plumped look. So I still feel like the contours of my face are a little bit softer, and I do look a little bit younger when I wear it, which is my goal with this foundation to begin with. And then I also have the Makeup by Mario concealer, and this was released maybe a little less than 2 years ago. And so I did discuss this in a video that I recently did on all of the liquid concealers that are in my collection. And so I think that compared to a lot of the other concealers that have been released, especially over the past year, I don't think that this one is as good. I think that if I'm not careful, that this does emphasize the wrinkles or other texture on my face, and I also think that it's not really ideal for me to use as an eyelid primer, because even though I can use it, I think it might be very, very slightly irritating. And so this is not a concealer that I would probably buy again, but I don't think that it has been awful. And so I did put a little bit of it on in the video footage, just so that you could take a look at it, but I did tend to be using it really sparingly, because I don't think that, especially if I use it in this eye area and I use very much of it, that really does my skin a lot of favors. It's not really an ideal concealer. And in terms of the shade that I picked out, this is shade 120. And I do feel like this is not a great shade for me. I think it is way too light. And it was the case that very recently Makeup by Mario has come out with some new concealer shades. And so I think that at this time I would be able to find a concealer that was much more appropriate for me in terms of the shade range. And then next in the video footage, I will work on my brows. And so the brow pencil that I am using is called the Master Blade Brow Pencil, and I have this in the shade Dirty Blonde. And this is a product that I only tried out several days ago, and I went to the Kohl's Sephora that is fairly close to me just to see if there was anything that they had there that I had never tried. And I saw this pencil, and so I thought that I would give this a try. And when I came home, I realized that the reviews on this are not really great. And there have been some people especially that have suggested that it has broken on them. I feel like it's been all right for me, and I've used it several times now, and I don't feel like it has broken at all. And it has this little clicky up and down thing that makes you be able to adjust it pretty easily to get the right length for what you're looking for. And it's a slant-tinted brow pencil, but it is one that I feel like is a little bit on the powdery side, and so I can put it on fairly easily. And I don't think that I've noticed that it has any propensity to break, and I haven't really been all that careful with it, so I am not sure why some people found it to break so easily. Maybe it is that some batches are more dried out and older than others. I'm sure that that likely is the case. But in any case, I wouldn't say that this is my favorite brow pencil. I do really like the Jones Road brow pencils, which have the little fibers in them, because I think that those give a really natural look to my very sparse brows, even if I don't use anything else in combination with them. Whereas this seems more like an ordinary brow pencil, and that I really do need to use a brow gel on top of it in order to get anything like a natural look. But in terms of filling in my brows pretty quickly, and in terms of not having broken for me, and in terms of looking like a reasonable base that I can fill in things and then put the brow gel on top of it, this has actually been pretty good for me so far. So I will keep playing with it and report back on it, but my experience has been a lot better than other people's, it seems. And there are 8 different shades in this, and I think that the Dirty Blonde shade has been perfectly fine for me. And then with that setting spray on, I don't think that I would have needed to use a powder in addition to that. But I do have this Makeup by Mario powder, and I have liked it in general. And so I will go ahead and show you that by putting just a little bit of this on in addition. So this is called the Makeup by Mario Soft Blur Setting Powder. And I do think it looks nice on my skin. I don't think that it is really drying. But on the other hand, if I am wearing a foundation especially that does have a little bit of moisture to it, I do think that it works nicely with those kinds of foundations. So I have used it with, for instance, the Patrick Ta foundation a number of times, and I do think it works really nicely with that. And I also think that it would work really nicely with the Jones Road foundation. I think that would be a good combination as well. And I think that this is just a really finely milled powder. It does feel really nice on my skin, and I do think that it blends in really easily, and that this blurring concept, it doesn't sound totally wrong to me. I think that there is a little bit of blurring when I do use this powder. And there are 7 shades of this powder, and so I did give a variety of the shades a try in the Sephora store. And what I found is that really all 3 of the lighter shades all seem to work perfectly fine for me. And so I actually ended up buying the one that is called Neutral Peach. And so I will take the lid off of this, and you can take a look at this. And I think that this is a really, really terrific shade for me. Now, one thing that I will point out when I take the lid off this container is that it does tend to be the case that anytime I open the lid to this container, there is way, way too much powder in the top part of the container, and that these holes are a little bit on the large side, so the powder must come out really easily. And so if I were the kind of person that was just using this one particular powder and didn't have a whole lot of other powders around, and I was just keeping it on my shelf or drawer and then taking it out and never turning it over, then I think it would probably be okay. But the problem is that I move stuff around a lot because I have so much different kinds of makeup that I'm trying out. And so anytime this powder gets turned over, a whole bunch of it does come out in the lid here. So I think that it would have been nice if they had included some kind of a cap on here to keep that powder from coming out as much as some of the more recent powders like the RMS one that I purchased have done. But in terms of the powder that is in this has worked for me. I think the powder itself has been really terrific. And in terms of the other shades of the powder, the one that is shade 1 is called Fair Pink, and this one is only very slightly pink, and it is more like a whitish type of a powder that I think is a little bit brightening. So insofar as it has that pink in it, it does offer a little bit of brightening to the skin, but it's mostly a very pale powder. And so if I put that on, I think my skin actually looks a little bit lighter and a little bit brighter, which is not necessarily so much what I am looking for, but it is one that I would be able to use. And then the second one is called Neutral Light, and this one is a little bit darker, and I do feel like it's leaning very slightly yellow. And so it might be the case that if my skin were more reddish from irritation, for instance, that slight yellow color in it might be a good thing. But I personally tend to lean a little bit more towards having a little bit more of a peachy or pink type of a color in my powders, because I feel like it gives my skin a little bit more life, and like there's a little bit more blood flow rather than it looking sallow, which is another thing that happens when you get a little bit older. And so I think that for me, this Neutral Peach shade has been really good. So in general, I have liked this powder, and I did get a chance to use it somewhat in the fall when it was still kind of warm outside and when my skin was still getting kind of sweaty, and I thought that it worked nicely for that kind of occasion also. And so in general, I think this is a very nice product. And although I like the setting spray more in combination with this particular foundation, I think that this is a powder that I feel really good about as well. And so now let's move on to their bronzer. And so the bronzer that I have is called the Soft Sculpt Transforming Skin Enhancer in the shade Light. And I would say that this is definitely a bronzer. It's not a product that most people probably would use as a contour shade, and that it does have some peachiness in it, but it is a product that goes on the skin very easily. It blends in really well. It's a thin type of a product, and I feel like I can put it on without thinking about it a whole lot, and that it does look really nice on my skin. And I do think that this is a pretty popular product for them, one of their more popular products. And what they describe it as being is as a skin enhancer that is a 3-in-1 cream bronzer that warms, shapes, and evens skin tone with light to medium coverage and a dewy finish. And I do think it does have that dewy finish as well. So it doesn't have any shimmer in it, and I think that it does look really natural on my skin because it doesn't have the shimmer, but it also does make my skin look a little bit more moist and kind of just pretty looking, which is a good thing as far as I'm concerned also. And this is a product that is made in Italy, and so most of the products by Makeup by Mario are made in the US, but a couple of them are made in Italy, and this is one of those. And so I suspect that that is one of the reasons that I like this so much. And it is available in 6 different shades, and I have the lightest shade, and I think that this has been perfectly fine for me. And my feeling about cream bronzers is that a lot of times the cream bronzers that are out there, that they either are too thick and too difficult to blend or too pigmented, or that they lean too orange, or sometimes they lean too gray, and that it's been very difficult for me to find a really good bronzer that I have really liked. And that in some cases, the bronzers that otherwise might be good, that they tend to go on actually too sheer, and that they tend not to last very well on the skin. And I think that this one really hits the marks in terms of all of those things, and that it doesn't go on too thick. It is really, really easy to blend. It is one that I can use really easily with my fingers, but without feeling like I'm making a big mess. And I think that it does stay in place pretty well, and it does look nice throughout the day when I use it. And it does have a slightly peachy look to it, but I don't think that it is so peachy that a lot of people would not be able to wear it easily. And my skin does tend to like peachy type bronzers, maybe more than some people's, and so I can tolerate a bronzer that is a little more peachy than some people would like. But I think this one is easygoing enough that a variety of people have reported being able to wear it really easily. And then, as I said, Makeup by Mario is a brand that is kind of associated with Kim Kardashian and with the concept of contouring your face. And so, as you would expect, they are offering a couple of different products that are supposed to be designed for contouring, or that I believe are designed primarily just for contouring. And so the first one is called the Soft Sculpt Cream Contour and Bronzer Stick, and this is $32, and this is one of their more popular products, and I have tried it out a number of times in the store, but I haven't actually brought myself to actually buy it. And the reason for that is that this is a contour that is quite gray. And so if you're looking to contour your face, for instance, by simulating shadows and by putting the product underneath the cheekbones, then I think that this would be one to consider, because it does have quite of a gray look to it. And so it should look natural in terms of contouring, whereas a warmer product would not look natural. But in this case, I tend not to be a person that is really a fan of the idea of contouring my face. And I think that for me, I think that especially as I've gotten older, my skin has gotten kind of gaunt. And so I'm feeling like I have as much cheekbones as I actually want. I'm not looking for something that is a lot more angular looking, regardless of whether that is in style. And I'm not unhappy with my nose, and I'm not interested in contouring that. And so in general, I think that a soft, natural look is one that I really like. And so the contour stick from Makeup by Mario, that one is one of their more popular products. But when I look at the user reviews on the Sephora site, I'm not sure that people are necessarily all that enthusiastic about that product, because I do see an awfully lot of people complaining about it, either in terms of the packaging, or in terms of it irritating their skin, or in terms of, in my case, the color of it, or in some cases in terms of the idea that it may be going moldy. But still, they do seem to sell an awful lot of this stuff. And then also last year, Makeup by Mario released a new product, which is a liquid bronzer and contour product, and it is called the Soft Sculpt Multi-Use Bronzing and Shaping Serum with Hyaluronic Acid, and it is $36. And so it comes in a container that's a little bit interesting to me, because it has a pump on the top that you could use it and pump it on your hand, and then maybe even mix it with like a moisturizer or something, or a foundation. And then in addition, it has a top that screws off, and then inside here there is a doe foot that you can use to put it on more discreetly in particular areas of your face. And so this came out last year, like toward the beginning of 2024. And the previous year, I had really, really liked the Jones Road bronzing drops. And I had gotten some use out of those, especially when I wasn't wearing any foundation at all. I think that those were really nice and natural looking on my skin. And at the time, I didn't really find any good alternatives to that Jones Road product that were on the market. The Drunk Elephant product really irritated the heck out of my skin, and I didn't find anything else that was really appealing. So when this new wave of liquid bronzers came out, I was kind of excited, and I bought a bunch of them, and this was one of them. And what I found with this one is that it really does not work for me as a bronzer at all. And the reason is because I don't think it even really should be labeled as a bronzer. I think that it is quite gray, and that it is much more like the sculpting stick than it is like the bronzer that they are offering. And so I'm not saying that there's no one in the world that could use this as a bronzer. I think that there are some people who have much more cool skin than I do, or who have more olive type skin, and maybe some of those people could use this as a bronzer. But I think that for this, that if I were going to use it, it really would only be for sculpting purposes and putting it down here so that it's more simulating the look of my having a more angular face. And there are 7 shades available, so there are a wide variety of shades. And so if you are looking for a contour, I think this is a nice product. It is really light, and it doesn't offer a lot of pigment. And I think that probably for a contour product, that actually could be a good thing, because if you're looking for a contour that's just providing a small hint of contour rather than looking like you have, for instance, a strip of dirt on your face, then I think that that kind of look would be very easy to get with this product. And so if you want a contour product, I would suggest giving this one a try. I think it could look nice for that, but it's not one that I particularly am finding appealing for me. So nonetheless, I will go ahead and put just a tiny little bit of this on right now, just to see what you think of it. And again, the lighting is not great today, so you're not going to get the full effect of it. But let's just put a little bit of it under my cheekbone, and then I'll try to just blend it in with my fingers. And you can tell me if you like this look on me, but I sort of feel like it is totally not that necessary, and really not looking that good even under the best of conditions. And I feel like it actually kind of looks different in terms of this side of my face versus the other side. So I will go ahead and put a little bit on this side as well. But you're not going to see me do this too much, because I tend not to really like the way it looks. But I do think it's a nice texture. It hasn't irritated my face at all, so I've been happy about that. And I think the flexibility of being able to use it easily with either that doe foot or with the pump, I think that that is an added value to that product. And then next I will talk about the Soft Pop Plumping Cream Blush Veil, which is $32. And it comes in the same packaging as that bronzer, and I do think it's kind of a companion product for the bronzer. And it is also made in Italy. So again, most of the products for Makeup by Mario are made in the US, but this one does come from Italy. And it is not exactly the same formula as the bronzer. It is not as thin, and it's not as slippy. It is a fairly thin product, so I'll put a little bit of this on the back of my hand so you can see this. It is a product that does go on quite thin. It's not a thick and sort of a sticky product the way that a lot of blush products, cream blush products are, but I think that it has a lot more tenaciousness than the bronzer. And in terms of putting some blush on your skin and then having it not disappear into the skin, I am quite amazed actually at the fact that this product does not seem to do that. And that when I put this on my face and then I look in the mirror, in some cases quite a long time afterwards, I find that it still holds up really, really well. And so the original formula of this, they were all in these really light colors. So I have the absolute lightest version, which is called Barely Blushing. And so this is kind of a dusty, light pink shade. And I think that this does look really, really natural on my skin. I would put a little bit more on, but I did put on some earlier today, and I think that it's been holding up well. I know that I don't look like I have a lot of blush on, but I also don't look like I have no blush on, which is a lot of times what happens when I use certain products in these videos, that I look at myself halfway through the video and I'm like, gee, all of my blush totally disappeared. And in this case, I think it holds up really well. And so for those people who do have really light skin and are looking for a really understated blush, which doesn't really look like you are wearing blush at all, but that just looks like, you know, natural skin color that is really pretty. I actually really like this shade. And then there's several other lighter shades that were introduced at the beginning that are also fairly natural looking, but that do have a little bit more pigment. And then last year they came out with a bunch of new shades in this, and those are much more pigmented and brighter. And so I picked up this shade, which I thought in the store was really pretty, which is called Strawberry Sunset. And this is described as a cherry pink. And I guess the reason that I picked this up at the time is because red blush was really trending, and I think it's still kind of pretty much trending. And so I thought that this was a little bit more muted than some of the other red blushes that were out there, but that I thought it looked kind of nice on my skin, just as kind of a little pop of color. And so I will go ahead and put a little bit of this on sort of in this area here, and then blend it in. And I think that it does blend really, really easily. And that it does, even though it's a bright color and maybe brighter than I usually wear, I think it does blend into my skin and to look pretty natural and just kind of fresh. And especially in the summer months, I kind of thought that was attractive. And the other day, I put this on at the beginning of the day, and then I went out for like 6 hours or so and ran errands. And what I was really surprised to see is when I looked at my face hours later in the mirror, I could still see this product on it. And that is really unusual for me to have a product hold up. So it looks pretty much the same hours later as it does when I first put it on. And I didn't even have any foundation on at all that day. And so usually products will just sink into my skin really fast in terms of blush products. But this one seems to be not doing that, so that's really a surprise. And I would say that of the blushes that I have that have not done that, most of the other ones tend to be really kind of dry and a little bit difficult to blend in at the beginning. And in this case, I think this is so easy to blend that the fact that it doesn't disappear into my skin, that is a really unusual. So this is sort of a unicorn product as far as I'm concerned. It's one that I'm not seeing duplicated in other products. And so there are at present 10 different shades of this available. And now that I've tried this out a few times, I really feel like this is a product that is a little bit underestimated in terms of what people in general think about it and in terms of my own experiences with it. And so I do think that the next time that I go to Sephora next week, I'm going to try a few more of these shades and see if there's any that I really, really like, because I do really like the formula of this now that I've experimented with it some more. And then in addition, they have a blush stick that is somewhat similar to that contour stick. And so sometimes you can get them in a little duo, like at the holiday season. And so I have tried that a number of times, and that seems to be quite the opposite of this product. It is a pretty heavy product. It does go on pretty thick and kind of dry. And so it does take a lot more effort to blend in. And so I think that some of the complaints about that product are similar to the complaints about the contour stick. And so I haven't actually decided to buy that product yet. And now let's talk about the Makeup by Mario eyeshadow palettes. And so the Makeup by Mario eyeshadow palettes that they promote the most are their matte formulas. And so there is one that is called Master Matte's Original, and this is a palette that has all mattes in it, and it's on the warmer side. And then last year they introduced a palette that's called the Master Matte's Nudes, which tends to be more on the neutral to cool side. And this is the same price, which is $52. And so I've tried both of those products out several times at Sephora, and my experience with those is that consistently there are only a couple shades in that product that I can use, because in general everything that they are doing is very highly pigmented and they tend to be really dark shades, and most importantly they seem not to blend very well at all. And so what tends to happen is that if I do try to use those palettes, that it is very easy that no matter how gentle I am being, that they will just totally get carried away and they will create a look that is really terrible looking on my eyelids, and then I will need to use some kind of a product to remove it, and then it doesn't just brush off. Now, a totally different palette from Makeup by Mario that I did really like, and that actually turned out to be one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes, is the one that is called Ethereal Eyes. And this was introduced 2 years ago, I think, as a limited edition. It sold out almost immediately. They spent about another year and they got a few more of the units in, and they sold them for a few months. And then those all got sold out, and now it is not available at all. And so I think that that is really unfortunate, because I have really liked this palette, and I really don't understand why they don't make it into a permanent palette for them, because I think that for me it has been really terrific. And what I feel like for other people is that there are a lot of other people that like a palette that is much softer like this. And I think that probably, especially if we're talking about things like wedding makeup, I think that this works really well for something like that. For special occasion makeup where you don't want to give a dramatic look and you want to get something that's softer but prettier and a little bit unique and really high quality in terms of the shadows. And so this one does have a lot of mattes in it, but I feel like it is does not have the same problem as the Master Matte's products, that these tend to be a somewhat different formula. They're a little bit easier to blend, and the fact that the colors are on the more muted side also makes it a little bit easier as well. And in terms of this color story, I do really like this color story. I think that the colors in here, they tend to lean towards kind of muted peaches, and there's a little bit in here that's leaning towards like a taupey purple type of a color or mauve type of a color, and I think that those are really nice as well. So in terms of having a combination of pretty colors that are not too strong in terms of cooler and not too warm, I think that this is a really nice mix in terms of the mattes. And in terms of the shimmers of that product, I think that those are really terrific, and that they are more like topper shades, and they are topper shades that have a lot of really sophistication to it. And so I just don't understand why they won't bring this one back. I think that's really unfortunate. But I have looked around to see if I could find other palettes that I thought would give a look that was somewhat similar to this that are available. And so I have a few suggestions or a few things that I have been trying. And so first, the other day I was at Ulta, where I go just to let my dog be social and walk around the store. And so I spent some time looking at some e.l.f. products, and I'm a little bit interested in finding some e.l.f. products that will work for me, because a lot of people do really like them. But in this case, I was looking at the eyeshadows, and I found this one, which is called the Perfect 10, I think, eyeshadow palette. And this is 10 eyeshadows for $10. And they have this color story, which I think is quite new. And this is called Keep It Ethereal. And I think it is supposed to be basically the same color story as the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes. And so I will hold up both of these palettes, and so you can take a look at them in comparison to one another. And I do think that these are fairly similar in terms of the shades. In terms of the actual formulas, I think that there is a difference, and that the Makeup by Mario one, that the mattes do blend a little bit more easily. And in terms of the shimmers, I think that the topper shades in the Makeup by Mario kit there are much better in terms of giving an elegant look, whereas this one is more like a topper that has just mostly a translucent base with some little shimmery particles in it, but I don't think it's nearly as dramatically pretty of a look. But I do think that especially if you're drawn to the color story, and especially if you're looking for something that is very reasonably priced, and I don't feel like this has irritated my eyes at all, even when I've used it directly on my eyelids. And I also think that it has given a pretty look for my eyelids, and the ingredient list looks perfectly fine, and there's no talc in it. And so in general, I think that as eyeshadow palettes that I have found that are drugstore prices, I think this is actually quite nice. And then another product that tends to be cited as being similar to the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette is this one from a company called Doll 10. This is a palette that is made in Italy, and it has no talc in it, and I do think the color story is very pretty, and that the mattes tend to blend pretty easily. So this is called the Doll Squad 2.0 palette, and it is sold out on the Doll 10 website at present, but it did sell out at one time earlier, and then it did come back, and I do think that as the products that they sell go, that this one tends to be pretty popular, since it does tend to be similar to the Makeup by Mario palette, and since it does perform pretty well. And so you can see what these two look like in comparison to one another. And I think that in terms of the general look that you get from these palettes, that the colors are fairly similar. Now, what I will say is that this one does not, this one from Doll 10, this really does not have topper shades in it at all. It has 3 shimmer shades, but these are not topper shimmers. They are more like metallics, so they are going to offer you a full, it's not like you're putting it over a colorful eyeshadow and you still see the colorful eyeshadow underneath it. It is actually going to give you full color on your eyes. And nonetheless, I do think that it is very pretty, and I did put a little bit of that on my eyes earlier today. And so you can see what it looks like in terms of a couple of the shades in this palette. And so I have gotten some use out of this palette, especially in the days before I was able to get my hands on the Makeup by Mario palette. And I do really like the color story of this, and I do think that the shadows are good quality. And especially as non-talc shadows go, I think that these are perfectly good quality. And then another palette that I have liked and that I purchased late last year is called the Natasha Denona I Need a Warm palette. And I hadn't really thought of this as being similar to the Makeup by Mario's Ethereal Eye palette until I started looking at everything that I had in my collection to see if there were things that look like they might give the same sort of look. But we can compare these now, and I do think that a lot of the colors tend to be somewhat similar. The main thing that I think is different is that the Makeup by Mario version tends to have some of these mauve colors in it, whereas the I Need a Warm color tends to just have the warmer colors in it. But in general, I do think that this is a pretty palette. This one does have a lot of topper shades in it, so you do get some of that look, and the topper shades are really pretty. And in terms of giving a soft look that is a little bit on the warm side, I think that this one does do a good job with this. But what I think I would recommend even more for people that are trying to get a little bit of that look of this Makeup by Mario palette is this one from Natasha Denona, which I think was released maybe the beginning of last year, maybe a year or so ago. And this is called the Mini Starlette palette. And so if I hold this up in comparison to the Makeup by Mario palette, I think this one is actually quite similar because it has some of the sort of peachy colors, and it has a couple of those topper shades in it, and then it has one mauve shade in it, and it only is $27. And in general, what I find is that these little Natasha Denona products are ones that I actually use a lot, because with the big palettes, I usually end up going and putting them away somewhere because they are sort of getting in the way and taking up too much space, and then I don't use them as much, whereas this little palette, I can just throw it in my makeup bag that I'm using every day. And in a lot of cases, these little palettes are giving me kind of the essence of the larger palettes without being as much trouble. And in a lot of cases, these colors and these little palettes are so highly curated that I feel like all of them work for me really, really well. And I definitely feel like that is the case with this mini Starlette palette. And I think that if I were to create a palette that was sort of the best of the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette, I think it would be really hard for me to do better than that. And then in terms of eyeshadow palettes, Makeup by Mario also has at present a limited edition eyeshadow palette that is called Ethereal Eyes Moonlight. And so this is a palette that I guess is supposed to be giving some of the same vibes as the original Ethereal Eyes palette, but which is supposed to be sort of a smokier palette that might be more appropriate for evening use. And so this is a palette that was released at the end of 2024, and so I did pick this up, and I did intend to review it at the time, but somehow I never got around with it because of all of the Christmas releases. And so I will talk about this now, and I do have some footage of me putting these shadows on. And what I will say is that there are 3 shadows in here that are very, very dark, and that even if I just use them as an eyeliner, they tend to go on my eyes so dark that it immediately makes it into a smoky look, and there seems to be no getting around that. So there is this black one here, there's this dark blue one here, and there is this brown one. And although I usually like those shades in terms of being able to make an eye look, I feel like the formula of this is so strong that regardless of what kind of eyeliner brush I use, and regardless of how light of a touch I tend to use, that definitely makes my eye look really smoky. And so if I'm not wanting a smoky eye look, I think that this can still be a really nice palette. I just need to really restrain myself and not use those shades. And it does seem to be the case that usually I forget, and when I come back to this, I'm like, oh, I could just put on a little bit of that blue color in particular, because I do really like blue in terms of being an eyeliner for me, and then it changes the whole look and makes it into a look that I don't think looks bad, but I usually don't wear a look that is that dramatic for my everyday eyeshadow look. But if you cover over those 3 shades, then I do think that this palette is highly wearable, and that it does give the same sorts of vibes as the Makeup by Mario original Ethereal Eyes kit, in terms of it being an eye look that is more wearable on an everyday basis, but that does have a little bit of a specialness to it in terms of the textures, and that the colors are really on point. And so I do really, really like this particular palette for that reason. And so in terms of the formulas in this, I think that the formulas tend to be the same formulas that they are using in the Ethereal Eyes palette. They do not seem to be the same formulas that they are using in their Master Mattes products. They tend to be a lot more blendable. And in terms of the shimmer shades in here, there are 5 shimmer shades, and 4 of them are the topper shades. And so if I compare these palettes, this is the Ethereal Eyes versus the Ethereal Eyes Moonlight, and they're definitely different shades. I mean, they are totally different palettes, but I don't think that they look entirely disparate from one another either. I do think it's sort of variations on the theme. Now, one thing that I do recall is that when this palette was introduced this past fall, that there seemed to be a little deluge of people on YouTube who suggested that you don't really need to buy this palette, and I'm not going to buy this palette. And here are some suggestions of other palettes that you might buy instead. And I'm sure that some of those were their honest opinions, and that I think that it also might be the case that in some cases that was influenced by the fact that I think Makeup by Mario was one of those companies that if you're an influencer, regardless of your size, that you are not necessarily going to be able to earn a commission selling things linking through the Makeup by Mario site, and that you may need to be invited by Makeup by Mario in order to be able to get a commission. And so if you want to make people annoyed on YouTube and to tell people not to buy your product, that seems to be a good way to do that. And have not been invited by Makeup by Mario, but I don't make that much money on commissions anyway at this point because I am such a small channel. So what I will just go ahead and do is to talk a little bit about some of the other products that were recommended as alternatives and whether or not they actually seem to be similar versus different. And so the first one is the Doll Squad 3 palette, and this is from the same company. And this is not a dupe. It does not seem for the Makeup by Mario Etherealized Moonlight palette because it actually came out on the market a full year earlier. But it also does seem fairly similar. Maybe we think that the Makeup by Mario palette is a dupe for this Doll 10 palette. I'm not sure. So this is what they look like in comparison to one another, and I do think that a lot of these shades are very similar to one another, and they both have almost the exact same shade of blue. And again, these are not topper shades. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 shimmer shades in here, but these are again more like metallic shades. They're not toppers. Now, what I actually do think is that if I want to do a look where I am using this blue shadow or the black or the brown to line my eyes, I think it's actually easier to do that with this Doll 10 palette. I don't think that those are as pigmented and they don't go on quite as strong. And so I actually think that I can use those more easily as liners. And so the look doesn't sort of get carried away as being as smoky as with this Makeup by Mario palette. And in general, I did enjoy this product quite a bit for the year that I purchased it before I got this Makeup by Mario palette. Now I seem to use the Makeup by Mario palette a bit more just because I do really, really like those shimmers in that palette. And then in terms of the YSL quads that might be considered slightly similar, one of those is their most popular product. Oh, this is really a mess. This one is called Store Dolls, and so this is number 100, I think, and I managed to crush this particular shade here, and I managed to piece it back together, and I'm still able to use it, but it's not really the best look in terms of demonstrating. But I'll hold these up to one another. I don't think these are very similar at all. There are a few of the shades that are in the Store Dolls palette that you also can see in the Makeup by Mario palette. But in general, I think that these are really different looks from one another. And then there is this one, which is definitely an evening palette, and this one is 700. And so I will hold this one up, and I don't think this one's too similar either. I think that in terms of it being like a smoky eye, I think they're definitely both giving you a smoky eye, but in terms of the exact look that you are going to be getting, I don't think these are real similar. And then of course there is the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette, and I would never try to suggest that people not get this palette. I think this is one of my very favorite palettes, and everyone does really like it, and a lot of people already have it. And I think that, this one does have 3 shades of aluminum powder. So there's this one and this one and this one. And so I just remember not to use those, but you could take them out. So if we compare this to this Makeup by Mario Moonlight palette, I don't think so much that even if you're not looking at those dark shades in the Makeup by Mario palette that they really look that similar to one another. They both are giving you really pretty shimmery looks, and you can do something that is pretty but not too smoky with it as long as you restrain yourselves from using those smoky shades. But in general, I don't think of them as really substitutes for one another. I think of them as palettes that I enjoy using both of them. And then finally, let's move on to lip products. And so I have 2 lip products from Makeup by Mario. A lot of their lip products do have ingredients in them that I would prefer not to use, including fragrance. And so I haven't picked those up. But the products that I have, first of all, I have one of their lip pencils. And this I actually have liked quite a lot. I think that as lip pencils go, this one is one of my favorites in terms of how easily it goes on and in terms of how nice it looks. And so I only have one shade of this. I have a shade that is called, let's see, Lauren. And I actually really like that, and that is what I am wearing today. There are 21 shades in total, and I feel like maybe I should try to pick up some more of these shades at some point, because this one has worked really, really well for me, and I'd like to experiment with these a little bit more. And then last year, Makeup by Mario came out with a line of satin lipsticks that are called Super Satin lipsticks. These are $28, and there are 18 shades, and they did get really, really good reviews. For a while, I did hold off in terms of buying one because they do list fragrance on the ingredient list. But then someone persuaded me that this, even though it says it's fragrance, it's actually just vanillin. And although vanillin is not my favorite ingredient to have in lipstick, I am willing to at least try lipsticks that have vanillin in them. And so I did give this a try, and I do agree that probably this is just a synthetic vanilla flavor and not really a perfume per se. And so I have been able to wear it from time to time, and it's not totally objectionable to me. And I do agree that this performs really well. And so I've been filming, maybe an hour, 2 hours, something like that so far. And I put this on right at the beginning, and so it's worn off a little bit, but in general, I do think that this holds up pretty well, and it goes on pretty easily. And so let's just put a little bit more on just to touch it up a little bit. And so in general, I do think that these are really pretty, and I think that there are a lot of really pretty shades. And so if you don't mind a vanillin type flavor in a lipstick, then I think that these are really nice. And this shade that I'm wearing, by the way, it's called Dumbo. And Dumbo, all of these lipsticks are named after areas of the New York City area, or things associated with the New York City area. And so Dumbo, I think, is down under Manhattan Bridge Overlook, which is in Brooklyn. And so this is, I think, supposed to be a spiced rose shade, and I do think this is a really, really pretty shade, and that some of the other shades from Makeup by Mario are very pretty also. And by the way, I think that their newest product from Makeup by Mario is a lip gloss type of a product, and I haven't had a chance to actually try that out or to smell it yet, and so I'm not sure if the fragrance in that is listed on the ingredient list, if that is also a similar fragrance in terms of the vanillin, or if it's something that is different. So probably I will go to Sephora and swatch that on my hand and see how it smells, and then maybe think about picking it up. But I haven't heard so many good things about that product that makes me feel like I'm really missing out if I don't get it. And now there's so many good lip glosses and lip oils on the market that I'm not all that feeling that I need to go get that right away. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video. And if you have had any experiences with Makeup by Mario products, then I would be really interested in hearing what you have thought of them. In addition, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And also, if you like this video, then please do hit like, because that helps the algorithm. And I hope that you are having a good early spring. And Coco and I do love you very much. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye. Ba-da-ba-da-da-bum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.